So I can start by saying that there is a documentary that has been done by the research of Derek Johnson. And actually, I have done a Swedish voiceover to that for the Swedish audience. So it's really important for us to understand what has happened the past years, and Derek is the man to talk more about that today. Hi, Derek. On the road, I can hear.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have to get where I get service, but
Yeah, let's see if I can get you in picture here. And let's see, select screen. And we take me and we take you. Looking good. How's the weather?
hot today. It's been cold and then it got hot again. So, yeah.
I think we want to hear you properly. So yeah, I'm so happy that you made the time. You have a very busy schedule, I imagine. It's been a
Well,
couple of months. What have you been up
yeah,
to,
it's been a
Derek?
couple months. Well, just finishing up a book and doing a lot of stuff with that, trying to get all the pieces put in the right place. Almost done with that. I got one more little segment to put in there, and then we'll get that off to the publisher, and then just keeping people up to date with what's going on, what's taking place, and trying to keep people calm and trying to keep people excited because they're watching that swamp being drained all over the world and they don't even realize it. So
There are a few that does, and can be appreciative to your research. And has been a documentary from your research by Nick Alvear. Can you tell us more about that?
yeah, we initially was going to sit down and do a sit down kind of deal, but I told him I didn't really want it to be about me to begin with because I think so many people can't differentiate when people are being genuine and real and trying to really help people. So I wasn't against anything, but I mean, I know that I brought this little blueprint to the table for people that it's all laws and orders I didn't write or pass, but I condensed it down. But I just told them, I just prefer not to make everything about me. And so, like as far as me sitting there talking the whole time, I don't think people really engage in that as well because I do that already, and people, don't engage in that. So I think what he did made it in a condensed slash movie in its own kind of right, where people can engage but not get bored. I mean, put some cool music pieces in there, and so it's music people have all heard, and I just think he made it exciting for people to want to go, okay. And it's little nuggets. It's not, hold on, there's a tractor coming by. Hold on really quick. So
Yeah, no problem.
this is, there's a good old America right here, and got a tractor going by.
Great.
But
where are you
they're
at?
cutting I'm in Alabama right now, and they're cutting all the highways on the side of the highways. They cut it where deer people can see deer better. Um, I hear the other one coming now. There's two of them. They run in twos, but I think he made it where people can engage and not get bored, but also not get too much information thrown on them at one time. It gives them just enough that they can go look up that nugget and then go, wow, I had no clue about this. And then they can dig a little deeper that way.
Mm. Actually, yesterday I was finished with my Swedish voiceover. So actually, I launched the movie in Swedish yesterday.
Oh wow! So it's in. So it translated. I didn't know that. Yeah. Well, that's awesome.
I speak the voice as I try my best as he does.
Oh,
It was really hard because English is so much easier to. Yeah, I did the voiceover.
Okay. Wow, that's awesome. Well, I'll tell you,
So
that's
we want.
I thought about that. You know,
Yeah, it
we
is.
talked about that too. We talked about that with Spanish, you know, because we have such a big Spanish culture in America. All kinds of Spaniards, you know, true
Yeah.
Spanish, and then Mexicano Spanish, and but you know, I'm thought, you know, that's a great idea. That's really awesome.
Yeah, actually, I gave him some advice how to do it because it's you have to. Yeah, it's like.
Well, I think you
Back.
did a great
Yeah.
job. I mean, I'm like with me, you know, I'm a visionary person. I can see stuff like that, but putting it together, I'm not a computer person. So I would, you know, I can see the vision, and but I could not. I wouldn't be able to put it together like that. And I have trouble already for some people condensing down what needs to be condensed. But then again, I mean, some of this stuff you can't condense down. You can, but it's doing injustice for people to condense it down, and it still, if you condense too much down, it promotes too much complacency of what got us where we are in the world today. And it doesn't promote. Well, I speak more on behalf of Americans, obviously, because Americans, it's like President Trump said the other day, we spend more money than any other country in the world on education, but we're still last in education. Make sense of that. It will really, where the money's going is not into education. The money's not going in education. The money's going into the pockets of these people who call themselves educators, and they're not educating at all. It's going in their pockets. But you know, by statistics, the rest of the
No, it's
world
all about
are more
propaganda.
intellectual. Well, and the rest of the world are still, on an average,
I don't know about
more
that.
intellectual. Well, I think so from certain standards. You know, in America, we are free and we have freedom, and we're spoiled because of that lifestyle, and rightfully so. We're spoiled in the right way, but the but to that is it still creates complacency from a different manner, where we over here we put more emphasis on our children becoming famous and becoming popular and becoming a personality versus education first. And then if that happens, it's a bonus in life. You know, if I had it to do all over again, or if I had a child and I was raising a child, the way I grew up thinking that country music was an actual job that you could move to Nashville, Tennessee, and you just look good, sound good, and then boom, you got it. Never knew it was some corrupt, deep political system, right? Nothing like that. Well, it, I lived my whole life thinking that, and I put my education in my early years more on the back burner, going, well, I'll just skim by, and I'll just skim by, and then I'll get here. Well, you know, I didn't do terrible in school, but I could have done more. I'm one of those that I admit that. I'm like, well, I was a B, C student in college the first time around when I was 18, 19, 20. I could have done a lot better, a lot more had I, me, myself, and I, see, I was already out of the house. It was on my way of thinking. It wasn't my mom and dad's way of thinking. My mom and dad were big on education, big educators. It wasn't my mom and dad's fault. It was me, myself, and I. So, you know, if I'd have pushed myself more, I don't know where I'd be today. I might be in a little better position a lot earlier than I was. And I just say for Americans to promote education first. Promote education first. Work hard. Study hard. Everybody and their mama's passing by today. Everybody. Of all places, I'm in the middle of nowhere. It normally is not
I
like
mean,
this.
it's
But we just don't put emphasis on real
yeah, but
education and what
Trump
matters
is
in your
right, you
life.
know.
We call education, what we've called education the last 40, 50 years is not education on things where let's just for say the banks just went boom and just shut down. Well, we got people over here who would panic. They wouldn't know how to live off the land. They wouldn't know how to do anything, right? They wouldn't know. That is still education in itself. Education's not always around a book. Education is how do you survive when you absolutely don't have a thing or a dime to rub together? How do you survive? We don't teach that over here. We have so many people who would go into chaos and panic mode if they didn't know how to get to a store to buy food. They wouldn't know what, they wouldn't eat a squirrel or a rabbit. They would starve to death. They wouldn't even know how to catch one, how to clean one. And then they'd, this is inhumane.
No.
All this stuff. I'm not saying that we should kill rabbits and squirrels. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying if we had some dire, crazy situation in life happen in this new cushion world we live in, would you be able to survive? No, most people wouldn't.
No.
And so that's where we are and that's the stuff that I harp on the most, is that Americans brag on titles and ranks and positions, and most of these jobs are made up titles you're like, what is a goldfish handler, or whatever,
Exactly.
like, what is that?
Yeah.
Right. And so that's what I push the most, is like, look, well, yeah, let's get back to the basics. And the basics work for everybody, no matter where you're from, what origin, nationality, where you're from. It's like what President Trump says, America first doesn't mean Americans only. He means that every country needs to think for themselves, because you have a culture. You have a way of life there. Y'all have a culture, and you should cherish that and uphold that and fight for that. But that don't require fighting Norway for Sweden's culture, right? It don't require you fighting some other country for that, unless they're invading you, and it's not a invasion for the right reasons.
Norway, but
right? Well,
yeah.
So, but
we are being
there's a time and a
invaded.
place for everything.
Trump talked a lot about that, the problem. Yeah. Can you hear me?
So sorry about the delay here. It was working fine a while ago, but I don't know what happened. But
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but please, Derek, tell us more about your research. And I mean, the voiceover in Swedish will make so much more sense when you realize the position that Sweden has had in the swamp. I mean, the position with the controlling of the telecom infrastructure in 184 countries, 150 stock markets, the platform for that, AstraZeneca, SEB, Bank of International Settlements, and they are everywhere. ABB, that is power supply, also in the US. So when you realize how this small country, why did Trump talk so much about Sweden all the time? It's because, we were a national security threat for America. That's what he said. And that's why he called out Ericsson in 2015. So they knew exactly that if you have the leverage of controlling all of the internet and the telecom infrastructure globally, then of course you can listen to everyone, and then you have the leverage if you can use that and have the structure, and they do actually. So it's really nice for us to meet like this, and it's so good because I just launched this yesterday, and now you're on today. So this is so perfect, and I'm sure my audience they want to talk to you more about, I mean, how did you really find all this? Because this is in plain sight. You just digested it down for us, for everyone to see, actually.
well, I think a little bit has to do with obviously my raising and my upbringing from my family, and the military lineage in my family, and my military lineage. And I'm not knocking anybody else's, but mine. Always paid attention to detail. They love this nation for everything it is, flaws and all. Nobody's perfect. I mean, it's like anybody who thinks the world's perfect is absolutely crazy. All due respect, but you're crazy to think that we're supposed to just be perfect all the time. But I had a family that they love our nation and they love our foundation. They love our history. They know what's at stake. All of our founders in the U.S. First off, they came from what we call the motherland over there, which is obviously England, Scotland, and we call it the motherland over here. That's what the title was in the old days. And our founders were not Americans. They established an American way of life. They call it America, but they weren't Americans by originality. And I try to tell people all the time, if you'll remove that definition and that title and make them what they were fighting their own people. They was like, look, we fled there to come here to get away from that. And no, we're not doing that anymore. And the other thing about our founders, they were all businessmen. They were successful lawyers, blacksmiths, doctors, store owners, merchant owners, farmers. They were all successful. So they didn't have anything to gain, but they had everything to lose. See, and that if you it's all a mindset and an attitude. And once you ever, I tell people, once you ever put that into the terminology and the right context, they had nothing to gain and everything to lose because they had already fled. They'd already fled to come over here. This is what they gained. So they flee. They come across this big ocean. Back then, that was a stretch to get in a boat in a ship and go across waters where they didn't even know. They thought the Earth was flat, or they thought it fell off at the end of what they could see. So that was a big stretch back then, and it was very bold and brave to get in a ship, pack your families up, not knowing where the heck that went, and to sail and to land where they landed. And so, if people would put everything in the context of that, you can't know what you don't know. See, people look at that today because America exists. They didn't know that it existed. They went by the word of someone who saw it and said, "Hey, there's more of this over that." Well, I mean, if you're not someone who's bold and brave and adventurous and spontaneous, you're probably sitting there going, I don't know. I think I'm doing pretty good right here, no matter what kind of hell you were going through, no matter what kind of tyranny. You're thinking, well, I would rather go through this and live my life to be old versus go over on that, not knowing where it goes and cut my life off short. There are people who think like that. So if people would put it in that context, like a storyteller, put themselves in that position. That's what our founders did. And then when they got over here, they're like, well, we gained this. That was their gain. Then they had to set up why they gained it. They had to set up, okay, we did that. So what they had to lose was more than what they had to gain. So what they would have lost was coming all the way over here, going through all of that emotions, fear, scared, all that, and getting here. And then these people come over here and go, well, y'all came over here, we're coming too. And they tried to establish the same thing that they just fled from. And they were like, oh, heck no. We just, nuh-uh, you ain't coming over here. We're not living like what we just came from. So that's what they would have had to loss if they let those people come over here and establish. And they tried to. The King of England, they tried it. Heck yeah, they were successful for a long time. That's why the Boston Tea Party happened. That's why Paul Revere rode through the streets and said, the redcoats are coming. All he's saying is, our old buddies are coming. Our old friends are coming. It wasn't like, now they didn't know each other personally, maybe, like, oh, my buddy John's on the other side and he ain't coming over. No, but they're the same people. They're fighting their same people. It's what happened in the Revolutionary War. So when people put that in the context, and then you fast forward to where we are now, it's the same legislation. Everything that we have and operate in the United States of America is the same legislation that those founders established. All right. So what we tell people like me and my family who know that, it's like, look, if you don't like it, well, then we have a process for that. All right. And you can go through that process. And if that process doesn't work and you want to fight it out in the field again, then you're going to fight for it. We're not just going to hand it over to you and go, well, okay, you don't like it. So we love it, but here you go. No, that ain't how that works. Now, I'm not saying fighting's the answer, But our founders thought so. Our founders thought so. Our founders threw a revolutionary war. Our founders incited violence. Our founders said, okay, well, you don't like it. Well, then we'll fight over it. And then we'll see who wins after that. And then we'll see who establishes what. That's what took place. Now, I don't think we should fight for it right now. We don't have to. We have enough people that are changing it up here. And so what Donald John Trump, he's the face of this whole thing. And he gets the credit, and rightfully so. However, in another kind of good manner, it's not all him. The military came in and is backing him. There's no way that that man went around the world like he did. Went into North Korea, the forbidden city of China, walked in front of the Queen. He played hands with the Pope. All right, he was messing around with the Pope. And then Saudi Arabia, the sword ceremony in Saudi Arabia was massively iconic. And then why in the heck, think about this, you're native Swedish. Well, think if you were native Israeli. Think if you were a Jew. What is an American president doing declaring Jerusalem capital of Israel? Why wasn't it one of their descendants? Why wasn't it someone of the Jewish descent? Why was an American president declaring Jerusalem capital? Never been done before in history. Why was it an American president who's not a Jew, who is not a descendant of the Israelis? Explain that. And let me tell you why that's so iconic and historic and monumental and biblical is this. JFK, Donald John Trump, is doing what JFK set out to do. All right, JFK was going to dissolve the Federal Reserve. He was going to dissolve that. He went around the Federal Reserve in January 1963, went straight to the Treasury and took $4.3 billion. What did that show the deep swamp of that era? Oh boy, we got a president who just went right around our system and went straight to the Treasury, which should show you the Treasury and the Federal Reserve are completely different, which they are. So what happened in 1963? No matter what people think, there's a lot of stuff out there. I taught simplicities. Let's just talk basic simplicities. Don't worry about JFK actually lived and he went in witness protection and this, that, and other. Let's just talk what we know. Facts is what I tell people. In 1963, January, he took that money, and by the end of that year, he was gone. All right? So that's all people need to know. Well, Donald Trump's doing the same thing, but Donald Trump would have never, ever, and anybody who knows anything about diplomacy and all these other kind of rhetorics out there, Donald Trump would have never been able to do all these monumental, historical, all these trips and all these peace deals had he not had a massive world military backing him. All right, now the military is not supposed to storm in a country just because the people don't like something or just because, oh, you know, this ain't going well and law ain't doing what they're supposed to be doing. The military of the United States of America especially, they protect the Constitution, they uphold the integrity of the Constitution, and they protect the people in a different manner. They're not going to rush in the streets and create a war out there. What they did over here, Donald Trump established war in America. He declared a war on trafficking. He declared a war on human rights abuse, which encompasses all trafficking. And that entity in itself also calls out and it exposes all of the federal corporation and the Federal Reserve and where their monies were going, what the monies were funding, which was all hid in Sweden, Switzerland, Philippines. That's why you have the Gold Standard Act of 68, all right, and then you had the Nixon shock of 72. That wasn't that long ago, ladies and gentlemen. That was right before my life, especially 72 was 11 years before I came into the world. That wasn't that long ago. So they're retrieving the gold. We're going back to a gold standard act. That's why Donald Trump says gold all the time, the golden escalator, the golden nugget, the golden goose. Our America's golden age is just ahead. American's golden era is just ahead. He says this all the time. The state of Texas in the U.S. is the first state to pass legislation for gold-backed digital currency, not central bank digital currency, gold-backed digital currency. They're doing away with a central bank. They're dissolving the corporation. They're And ladies and gentlemen, the reason why it had to take so long is think about how long we've been living under this system. This system's been going on for years. We're talking about hundreds of years.
Yeah.
So in order to dissolve that, it's going to take a little disruption, strategic planning, strategic operation. Then once you clean it out, then you got to get the people in place that can read it, study it, understand it, comprehend it, and implement that and put that new system into place and be able to, oh, well, this system did this a day and that. It's a system, right? And it's going to take time.
Yeah.
But you're already you're 8 years into it, just about. We're almost 8 years into this operation. So anybody waking up just now, welcome to the club. Welcome to the good side of life. But you're 8 years into this, just about. So don't get frustrated. Don't panic. Don't worry. We got this. We got it. It's all going as planned. But it was going to take a little bit of disruption, a little uneasiness. It was going to be a little uncomfortable for a while. There's going to, unfortunately, God love them, and I say that with all due respect as a veteran of the United States military, but we're going to lose lives because this is a war. It is a war. We're going to lose lives. I may lose mine. I may lose a buddy fighting for it. You may lose yours, but you're part of a plan. You're part of an operation. People lose people all the time. Why don't you care about them? We've lost people in multiple wars that weren't even declared wars. Why didn't you care about them? So, when you only care about it once you're aware about it. And that's not how life works. So what everybody's watching is a declared war by Donald Trump in the War Powers Act of 1973, which is U.S. law. A president can declare war. Congress is not the only one who can declare war. And that's why President Trump says, if they're going to investigate me, they got to investigate every president before me, comma, immediately. Now, he said that wasn't typed out, but you have to visualize that context. If they're going to investigate me, they got to investigate every president before me immediately. So there will be a comma there, and immediately meaning not a month from now, not 2 months from now. If you're going to attack me, you better start investigating them right now. Every president before him, every president. Not Republican presidents, not Democrats, all of them, because they all abuse the law as it's prescribed. And that's what I teach people was terminology. You got to learn terminology. You got to learn definitions. You got to learn the context of it. You got to learn the grammar behind it. You got to learn the punctuation. And then you have to learn the structure and how everything goes together in law. And it's typed a certain way. It's said a certain way. And that's just how it works. So I tell people over here in America, it's not going to tell you in Alabama. Well, it's not going to tell you, like I tell people in Alabama hillbilly slang, it's not going to say Donald Trump is the commander in chief. It's not going to say that. But it says that in the right context, in the right law, as it's prescribed, in the terminology and the language of how the law works. It does tell you in the War Powers Act, which is 50 United States Code, section 1550, it tells you specifically that Donald Trump is the legal commander-in-chief in the actual language of law. It shows you that. And that's where he declared the war. And it's the same as a World War II history repeat, right? And especially Europe, not picking on Europe. I'm saying this in a respectful manner, but especially Europe. If anybody should appreciate World War II history, it should be Europe and how the United States got involved. Well, Donald Trump established a war the same way Franklin D. Roosevelt established one in World War II, by the same laws, by the same prescription of law as prescribed. Donald Trump used the same laws and orders. And in World War II, the United States helped a lot of countries create what they call governments in exile. They said, look, if you want our help and you want our protection, then you come under United States law. We will help you in your military, and we'll help you succeed, and you'll become an ally of ours, and we will protect you. We will protect the presidents of those, and then the presidents of those countries would have full control of their military. However, if there was an action needed, the United States had that command, and then that president would act under our president. Is it like a chain of command? That's what happened In the Philippines, especially, I use that one the most. The Philippines, it's called a Commonwealth Act number 671. That's in U.S. law. Commonwealth Act number 671. The Philippine president, Quezon, he came over to the U.S. FDR would fly him back and forth. He created a government in exile. He was in full control of his military and then under the U.S. They had a president named President Laurel who met the press. He was just a face. He met the press. He talked to the press. He was the one in the limelight while the actual president was over here in the U.S. majority of the time. That is what Joe Biden is. In a different kind of manner, it's not running the same parallel because it's a different operation, but it's the same manner. It's the same prescribed as what happened in World War II. It's a puppet state. It's a continuity government, which they now call a continuity of operations plan. Those are all prescribed in our law. We have these things called federal continuity directives. The first one came out January 17, 2017, 3 days before Donald Trump took his oath, the big famous oath. We're taking the power out of D.C. and we're giving it back to you, the people. He had 2 military officers standing right behind him. They had these little headbands on, which were optics, and they were military intelligence and judge advocate generals. All right, in our military, in the U.S. military, military intelligence collects the evidence. Judge advocate generals judges it. They review it and judge it. If it's a crime, well, that's how they punish people. It's by that intelligence. So that happened. 4.5 months later, Federal Continuity Directive 2 came out. So if Donald John Trump, which I know he was in full control of our government, if a continuity directive, which are all on .gov sites, were bad for this nation, Donald Trump would abolish that like that. He didn't, because this was a plan. All right, all those continuity directives have what they call a presidential policy directive. It's called a PPD-40. And those policy directives are where the president keeps the 3 branches of government over here, our 3 branches. So we have the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. They keep those going, performing what they call their national essential functions and their primary essential functions. For example, tornado pops up and it annihilates Alabama. That's a primary function, and it's a national function. Or a hurricane blows over Alabama, Florida, and Mississippi. That's a national essential function. That is a priority for them. And there's a list of those priorities on the .gov sites. So that continuity of government, continuity operations plan was put into place January 17, 2017. People say, well, how do you know to start with that one? Because there were continuity directives before it. Well, if you get to page 2 in it, just on page 2 in the bullet point of what it's telling you, what this book is about, the publication, it tells you anything prior to this book supersedes it. To start with this one. That's how you know to start with that one. And then the second one came out. Then there's publications under that. The most recent publication of it was October 2023, so just a month ago. The most recent one before that had a law reference in it. This one didn't have a law reference. But the most recent one with a law reference in it to prove Joe Biden ain't real and he ain't the president is in April 2023, which the most recent law inside of it was Donald Trump from December the 7th, 2020. If Joe Biden was president, I'm pretty sure in 3 years, he would have something in there of a continuity government in that publication. He didn't. The other thing that shows Joe Biden's not president, and this is really, I found a new way to say it to people, and this is another way to looking at it. I've already said it, but this is another way to say it. If Joe Biden was president, every one of his, not extensions, every one of his new acts and new executive orders would be found in a code somewhere. That's how executive orders work. They write an executive order here, or if you write an executive order and declare a national emergency, you'll find it in an act somewhere in the U.S. codes. That's how they pair, because they got to have other codes that it pairs with. One executive order don't stand alone. It's got to have like the National Emergencies Act with it. It's got to have the Immigration Act with it. It's got to have something that pairs with it. All right. So when Donald Trump became a wartime president, this is how you look at it. On December the 20th, 2019, 4 things took place. 1, the Space Force was established on December the 20th, 2019. The Uniform Code of Military Justice, which is military law in the U.S., was rewritten, reissued with new laws and published. The Courts Martial Handbook, which is what judge advocate generals use, Courts Martial, United States Courts Martial, which is a military court, was reestablished with new laws and published on December the 20th, 2019. And the War Powers Act of 1973, which is actually called the War Powers Resolution Act, because it has to have a resolution, has to have a resolve to it. Resolution Act was amended with this clause. This is where Trump became a wartime president. That clause is 50 U.S. Code Section 1550, and it specifically says, in the first 180 days after December the 20th, 2019, and every 180 days thereafter, that means until it is revised, revoked, rescinded, or mission accomplished, that act is active. Because the Military Justice Act, there's another act passed in 2016 by Obama, and Obama's Supreme Court, Obama and his Supreme Court, they did something never been done before in U.S. history and military history. They passed the Military Justice Act, and it was passed in the defense budget for 2017. Well, who was the president in 2017? That's Donald Trump's defense budget. So when you go look at the Military Justice Act, Obama's Supreme Court clarified these things. Military courts and military laws are separate from civil courts and civil laws. They separated president from commander-in-chief, and then they separated commander-in-chief from the federal government. So an American, if you're an American, or if you know about American history, the Supreme Court separated Article 2 of the Constitution from Article 3 of the Constitution, separated. Meaning there's separate entities, separate laws, separate everything, separate obligations, separate everything. Well, then fast back forward. Come back up to December the 20th, 2019. Come back to that first 180 days. In that first 180 days clause in the War Powers Act, where a president can declare war, hang with me, a president in America can declare war via executive orders with national emergencies, as prescribed by law. Now, a national emergency is only supposed to have, it has a 2-year clause on it. It ain't supposed to last 10 and 15 and 20 years like these other executive orders have done under federal corporation presidents. But Donald Trump issued 11 national emergencies in executive orders. He had a couple verbal national emergencies, but he had 11 in executive orders with national emergencies. Some of those made him a wartime president because of the language behind it was military oriented. Well, that is 50 U.S. Code, Section 1621. That's where you see that the president can declare war via national emergencies. The only person who can federalize the reserve components and National Guard to active duty, which are military language, ladies and gentlemen, that's military. We have active duty, we have reserves, and we have National Guard over here, okay? The only person who can federalize reserves and National Guard to active duty is the President of the United States of America. That's 10 U.S. Code 12302, 12304, and 12406. All right. If you're an American too, and if you're a veteran, as a veteran over here, when I took the oath to go into the military, me, myself, and I, when I went in the military, when I raised my right hand and I swore in, that was 10 U.S. Code Section 502. If you were an officer in our military, I was enlisted, but if you were an officer, you swore in under 10 U.S. Code Section 1031. So you can't say, well, I believe in the military and I support our military, but I don't believe what this guy Derek Johnson said. You can't say that because the same Title 10 that every single person who's ever taken the oath in the United States military swore in under, every single veteran swore in under the same Title 10 that Donald John Trump federalized the reserve components and the National Guard to active duty. And because of the Military Justice Act that separated the commander-in-chief from the federal government and the commander-in-chief from the president, when he gave that order as a commander-in-chief, that was a direct order. That's how the military works. The military don't work on certain kind of laws of federal laws. The military works on direct orders. That was a direct order from the commander-in-chief to his troops, to his military. All right, then you fast forward that first 180 days. That first 180 days, very critical. On March 2nd, 2020, what we call the Defense Production Act in America, Defense Production Act, which is 50 U.S. Code, Chapter 55. There's that 50 U.S. Code again. It's actually titled War and National Defense, not international, War and National Defense. It applies to America. America first, remember. War and National Defense. Well, let's go over here and look at that. On March the 2nd, 2020, the Defense Production Act was amended. It was extended to September the 30th, 2025. So that means, ladies and gentlemen, in layman's terms, and I mean that with all due respect, but in average ears terms, when they amended the Defense Production Act March 2nd and extended it September 30th, 2025, which would have been a 5-year clause, they already accounted for all the funds and appropriations. So Joe Biden, I always put quotes around him, Joe Biden, the media can say he invoked the DPA 147 million times, and it don't matter because the appropriations were already accounted for back here on March 2nd, 2020, in that first 180 days under the order of Donald John Trump on December the 2019. Then on March 27th, just a few weeks later, Donald Trump became a wartime president by definition in our law of a wartime president. Not a president who goes to Iraq and Afghanistan and who starts federal corporation and Federal Reserve wars. We're talking about a wartime president because of an attack on our nation. And it's an attack that people don't know because most people don't know who all these swamp people are. They don't know who the Rothschilds are and who works for them and all these people. They don't know these people. It was not a war like you were going to know about because you don't know these people. So Donald Trump on March 27th, 2020 became a wartime president by wartime definitions and by definition of a president who was under attack in the U.S. He federalized 1 million reserve components to active duty through Executive Order 13912. All right, and then April 30th, in that same 180 days, first 180 days, on April 30th, 2020, he gave the Secretary of Defense equal authority to federalize the reserve components as well. Now, hang with me. You got to hang. This is beautiful right here. This is where it all ties in. All right. That was a direct order from the Commander-in-Chief. All right. If you look in section 1550 and you scroll to the bottom of the page, it says executive documents at the bottom of it. It says for the fiscal year 2020. But it's got a memorandum in there from July 19, 2021. The reason why that don't make sense is this. In America, our budgets are passed in 2022 for 2023, 2023 for 2024, 2024 for 2025. It ain't backwards. You don't pass a budget in 2023 for 2022. That makes no accounting sense whatsoever. So here's a memorandum in here from Joe Biden, all right, on July 19, 2021, but it's a memorandum for the Secretary of Defense. And here's what it says. This right here proves Donald Trump is your commander-in-chief. It ain't going to say Donald Trump is your commander-in-chief. It says it in legalities. It was an extension clause. It's set up for an extension, and I'm going to show you how. And it's all ties in. And it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. All right, let this truck go by. So when you go and look up the Secretary of Defense, it's going to tell you this. The Secretary of Defense is nominated and appointed by the president. But ladies and gentlemen, all you good patriots all around the world, the Secretary of Defense is not a federal government position. It's a military position. So it's not, he doesn't report to the president. He's nominated by the president because if the president has to become commander-in-chief, which the Military Justice Act separates, if the president has to become commander-in-chief by a declaration of war, then the Secretary of Defense answers to the commander-in-chief because it's a military position. All right. And in that clause that Joe Biden didn't do that, ladies and gentlemen. This is all part of an occupation which is outlined in the Law of War Manual, and the continuity of government actually proves the military occupancy more than the MO proves the COG. But when you read that, it specifically says, I hereby delegate. Delegate means, all right, Cornelia, Derek Johnson, I relinquish my duties to you. I'm giving you this. I don't want any part of this. This is all for you. I don't want it anymore. This is yours. All right. That's what delegation means. You do this, and you are going to make me look good, though, because what you do is going to reflect on me, but you're going to do it. That's what delegation means. Joe Biden, quote unquote, delegated the authority. He delegated the authority and the functions, hang with it here, established, vested in the president of section 1550 to the Secretary of Defense. So if the Secretary of Defense is directly under the Commander-in-Chief, and Joe Biden down here is telling the Secretary of Defense, I want you to obey the orders of section 1550, that president, there you go. Because Donald Trump became a wartime president when he federalized 1 million reserve components March 27, 2020. That was a direct order. Those orders had not been revoked, revised, rescinded, or mission accomplished. And here's what ties it in. When I said earlier that if Joe Biden was president, by his, not extendables, by his declarations, by his executive orders, by his signature, if he was president, you would find this order put out July 13th, 2023, just a few months ago. Joe Biden put an executive order out that said he was, excuse me, he was sending 3,000 reserve components to Europe. That's Executive Order 14102. If Joe Biden
we have troops here.
was president, ladies and gentlemen, if Joe Biden was president, ladies and gentlemen, that Executive Order 14102 on July 13, 2023, guess where it would be? It would be in the 10 U.S. Code, section 12302, because that's the reserve clause where a president sends the reserves. All right. But guess what you find when you go over to 10 U.S. Code, section 12302? Very bottom of the page, guess what's on there? Only Donald Trump's Executive Order 13912, where he federalized the reserve components to active duty. If Joe Biden was president, his executive order would be under that. It's not, ladies and gentlemen. It's only on the federalregister.gov, and here's why. For the people who know about the federalregister.gov, if it wasn't on there, then most people will go, wait, everything Joe Biden they're showing on the mainstream media is not on this page right here. Where did it go? Well, the federalregister.gov is not, it's important in one way, but it's not. It's still a private entity. Even though it's a .gov page, I can register anything I want and put it on the federalregister.gov. It's not under the House, ladies and gentlemen, our House of Representatives, our Senate. It's not found there, ladies and gentlemen. Here's how it ties in even better. Here's your little cherry on the cake. It sure already had the cherry on top right now, but okay, we'll make that was your whipped cream. Here comes the cherry on top. All right. So now his order is not found where it's supposed to be found already. Look, go back to the date. Remember what I said in that executive documents? This already don't make sense. A memorandum from 2021 for the fiscal year 2020, that already proves the continuity of government. That already proves the military occupation. But then do your math. Remember what I said earlier? National emergencies have a 2-year clause on it. They're supposed to be addressed or resolved, a joint resolution within 2 years. We'll do the math on that. Go over to the executive documents in 50 U.S. Code 1550. Look at that date on it, July 19, 2021. Do your math. This executive order that he put out with his reserve components on July 13th, 2023, that's 6 days away from being 2 years. It's an extension. It has to be by law. That had to be put in by law. Not for Joe Biden's sake, Donald Trump. By law, it had to do that. Joe Biden ain't real, ladies and gentlemen, and the law proves it. Once again, if he was president, all of these executive orders that he's so-called signing, they have to be in the House.gov, have to be in these acts that prove that. And going back to the DPA, the Defense Production Act on March 2nd, 2020. If you went to Google right now, if you're watching this on your phone and you got your laptop handy, just type in Defense Production Act, comma, Biden. And there'll be the first things that pop up is not the actual Defense Production Act itself on a .gov page. The actual things that pop up are mainstream articles, and they'll tell you that Joe Biden has invoked the DPA 8 times, maybe more by now, but 8 the last I looked. Ladies and gentlemen, if you go over to the actual Defense Production Act, which is 50 U.S. Code, all right, Chapter 55, if you go to the actual act on a .gov site, an official government site of the United States of America, guess where his name is? Twice. But guess what they are? One, the first one is Donald Trump's act that he signed and passed, all right? So it's an extension. It's not one of Joe Biden's. It's an extension of Donald Trump. And the second place where his name is, here comes even more cherries on top. Hope you love cherries. It shows the baby formula mission. And in the mainstream media, if you go over right now, if you go to Google, type in NBC mission, baby formula mission, NBC.com, NBC mainstream tells you that the Secretary of Defense approves this mission. Meanwhile, Biden's doing this, this, and this. Biden ain't done doo-doo, ladies and gentlemen. It tells you the Secretary of Defense. Well, guess what Donald Trump did on April 30th in that first 180 days? Gave the Secretary of Defense equal authority as the Commander-in-Chief. It's all right in front of you. Joe Biden, you don't even have to see that Joe Biden got 3 cannons on January 20, 2021, but 3 cannons on January 20th when the whole world thought he got an inauguration. 3 cannons by military customs, not party affiliation. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, military, we don't care if you're gay, Buddhist, straight, atheist, mixed, black, white, Asian, Asian black mixed, Asian Mexicano mixed. We don't care what you are. Has nothing to do with that. Military customs are military customs. If you were gay and you served honorably in the military, you get a 21 gun salute when you die. If you were Buddhist and you served honorably in the military, then you get a 21 gun salute when you die. It don't have a thing to do with party affiliation, religious affiliation. Nothing to do with that. And by military customs, Joe Biden is the only quote unquote president who's received 3 cannons, which is a 3 volley salute, which if you go to Arlington National Cemetery.mil, you go to the Air Force Honor Guard.mil, official military sites of the government. If you go over there, it tells you the 3 volley salute is not to be confused with the 21 gun salute. The 3 volley salute is a military funeral service. And I rest my case.
It was so great. That was yeah. I haven't heard you talk about that. How you tied everything together there. That was kind of new. I think we were one of the first to hear it. The outlays like that. I really like that. Thank you so much. And you remember the last time when we spoke about Sweden and how we are under siege by the U.S. military, and we also have a continuity of government. Actually, we have a war delegation that is in charge of this country, and they just this week they held a closed door meeting, and you know who they had on the line? They actually have the vice spokesperson of Ukrainian parliament in that closed meeting with the Swedish war delegation. And you know, we haven't had a war delegation in 60 years, but in 2007, in 2017, they put it together, this war delegation, continuity of government, and so they are, I mean, to the occupying power, they are, yeah, how do you say, motpart, yeah,
Well,
They're working with them.
well, just a few days ago.
As in the
Well, just a
US
few days. Yeah.
with Biden and yeah.
Well, just a few days
Continue.
ago in America, there was a mainstream article. Mainstream, you know, I put quotations around it because it's all under the occupation. I tell people, you get frustrated, tired, mad, sad, angry, bitter, scared,
Yeah.
whatever. Everything's still under the military occupancy and the continuity government first, right? That's the first thing. All these laws and orders are under those.
Exactly.
All right, and it's all in operation. I know people get tired of hearing the word movie. Fine, it's an operation. That's exactly what it is in by law, and that's what's taking place by law. So don't think of it as a movie. Go, it's an operation, because that's exactly what it is. It is going to be a movie, and you're watching a movie per se, because everything's forecasted. But Zelensky, just recently, Zelensky, right? Here's listen, everybody. You want to know how Donald Trump's your commander in chief? Well, Donald Trump has been saying over and over and over and over and over again how he could solve the Ukrainian war in less than 24 hours. Now, I know it's an occupancy, and I know this has been planned, and all that is what they call a distraction. It's called devolution, which is actually found in the continuity directives. Devolution is a shadow government. They distract you on the front while the good guys are cleaning out on the back all over the world. That's what's been taking place. But if you didn't know that, and you're watching this from the normal standpoint, then I'll sympathize with you from this angle and go, look, Donald Trump has been talking this whole time about how he could stop the war in less than 24 hours. And all of a sudden, I never saw a single podcaster bring this up. I didn't see anybody out there, and I'm not talking about you, but I'm talking about the ones in America that's supposed to be really toting it. Zelensky, this was a mainstream article now. Zelensky, right? He's welcoming Donald Trump to come meet with him to show him how he could solve the war in less than 24 hours. I mean, that right there in itself, ladies and gentlemen, is showing you that there's a forecast coming up. There's a big plan and a big play out coming up of how the world's going to see, not just U.S., ladies and gentlemen, the world's going to see this world operation that's been taking place to remove all of the federal corporation, the Federal Reserve, Ukraine, and guess what Ukraine had? Guess what Ukraine had? Ukraine had U.S. funded, not Donald Trump funded, U.S. funded. Obama, Biden, Bush, all of that. U.S. funded biochemical labs, ladies and gentlemen. So we're not blaming the world. This was all a federal corporation with their own agendas that's been happening for many, many years. This is a good versus evil. There's good in every country. Everybody knows anybody that's got a brain knows there's good people in every country. We all want to live. We all want to breathe. We all want freedom. We all want the freedom to raise our kids the same, whatever way we want to raise them. And whatever that looks like to you, whatever your family looks, whatever that looks like, that's your business, right? And what these people have done to the world is they've established a system where it's chaos plus division equals power acquisition. They preach all the language. They say all the right stuff, but they preach in America. They say, "Oh, this is checks and balances, and this is what the law says," and they preach all this stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, they create a problem they already have a solution to. They create this problem and this chaos, and they know how to solve it. So they look like geniuses when they come over here and they end it all. But they created the very thing that they're ending. That's what we're ending. We're saying no more of that bull crap. You created this monetary system that's why Americans are most guilty. Americans base your success and your intelligence off of how much money you make. That has nothing to do with intelligence, has nothing to do with being smart, has nothing to do with being educated. That is where America went down the wrong path. We started idolizing actors and actresses and singers and songwriters. We started putting everybody up here. It's great to do it in the right way. I'm a singer-songwriter. It's okay to say, hey, you got a gift. Man, how did you write that song? Man, I love your music. It's okay. But when you idolize people and you put them on these pedestals, and then you tell this person down here that you ain't good enough because you didn't do this, that's where you got to draw that line. And that's what's been taking place with all these federal corporation people, is they created an agenda for their own system. You and I could be the polar opposite in the way we believe. Worship God, the way we believe in God, the way you believe in marriage, the way you believe in drinking. we could be polar opposite, but still, if you're not a part of their political system and their agenda, then they pin us together like this on stuff like that when it has nothing to do with that. Not a thing.
Yeah, exactly. And also, what you discovered when you wanted to become a country singer was that the system is rigged, right? So everything is rigged. It doesn't matter exactly how good you sing or I mean your music. If they want to hype you, they hype you. I mean, even if you can't sing. So it's kind of rigged. So it doesn't. We think about talent, but it's not so much about talent. They want to usher up the people they want, that they can control, that they want to show off with, and make us
who will
strive.
fulfill their agenda. Yeah,
Exactly.
that's it.
It's all about the educational system. It's agenda driven. Everything is about their agenda, and so it's not so much about it. And that's what Trump said. Also, what he said was that we don't want this in education. We have to make our own choices, but for those who wonder if this is a military operation or a sting operation to drain the swamp, what would you say to them? I mean, how can we know that this is a military operation ongoing?
Oh, well, absolutely. You're watching the swamp being drained right in front of you, and the only way you're going to know is to know. You either have to know the language of which I just showed you. Everything I just showed you outlines a military operation. That's military laws, military orders, and if you don't, if you don't, then here's what I say. Well, you have now your tools to go read and study. Start with those, and then you got to know someone like me who gives you all the tools. I tell people, don't follow me for me. Everything I show you, every time I talk, all I talk about are .gov and .mil sites, and I give everybody the links to go click on. Now, I don't tell you how to think. I don't tell you how to vote. I just say, here's the tools. Here's the military laws. Here's the military orders. Here's the federal laws. Here's the federal orders. And that's what you have to study. And you got to know that language. You got to know that terminology. You got to know the definitions. And then you'll see the military operation. That's what's in place. And everything I just showed you shows you the military operation. Now, when you also go to my pages on all my, especially my Facebook and Telegram, I post a lot more on there because you can put a lot more pictures at a time on there versus True Social and Twitter. But on Facebook, I show the aircraft daily flying around. Those aircraft are on orders. Military aircraft are on orders. Well, that foundational order is found December the 20th, 2019. That is the very order that established all the other orders. There's a foundational order, like a big order, and then there's a bunch of orders under that because we have 6 branches of military here. So we have 6 branches. All right, every branch has command centers. All right, they have commands all around the world. Well, that command gets orders. That command distributes its orders down to divisions, and divisions down to brigades and battalions, and all the way down to the batteries, and all the way down to the units. There's a lot of orders under the foundational order. So there's no way to know every little order and what each entity is doing. And even military personnel, especially the ones that are active and reserve and guard, they don't know what some divisions are doing because they're too busy doing what they're doing. It's like an ant. It's like an ant colony.
Need to know basics.
Everybody has everybody has what they got to do. Now they can know it if they got time to study that. They're sure they can because it's all book smart. It's all in legislation, current and bipartisan. All this is bipartisan too. It's not one party. You can know it. So you have to know I tell people this, you either have to want to know it fluent like I do and study it and know it and then learn it. Or if you don't have the time because you're working, you have children, you have a family, and you just don't have that kind of time, I get it. Then if you care about your society, if you care about, well, that too, and if you care about the world, you care about your community, you care about your people, your family, your friends, if you care, then you got to listen to people like me who I tell you all day long. I'll tell you what's going on But then for the people who want to research, then I give you the links to go look at, and I quote all my references right on screen all day, every day. So I'm giving you the tools. If you don't want to go click on those, then you got to trust me to say, well, he's given everybody .gov and .military sites, which is how our nation in the United States of America functions. We have two powers, military and federal government. Military has its own law and orders, and federal have its own laws and orders. They're separate entities. So if you don't have the time, if you don't have the capacity, then you got to trust someone like me is saying, well, look, here's all the laws and the orders. Here's what this is. And I talk about them, but I give you the links. If you don't want to go click on the link, then you got to listen to what I'm giving you and apply it that way.
Yeah. And also, Trump also said that from now on, we won't tell you exactly what the military is going to do. And I mean, what they did before was rigged. They created a problem. They already had a solution. This was smoke screens. This was in order to control the dollar, the narco dollar, the petrodollar, and it was all rigged. I mean, it was all about the natural resources. This private interest, like Wallenberg, the Swedish oligarch family that control this network, and Trump called them out in 2015 and said that this is a problem, this is a national security threat, and they actually took them under control in 2019. So now this company is under Space Force, because first it was under Department of DOJ, but now since the continuity of the government, it's under. So this is really interesting. And also what you said is in this documentary about the Federal Reserve, right? That now it's under Treasury, and people have to remember this when they are talking about this CBDC and so on. Yeah, but the Federal Reserve is no more. It's under the Treasury, under the continuity of government. So this is dissolved already. So, but people sometimes they can't have two balls in the air at the same time, because I mean, either this is a military operation, it's continuity of government devolution, or either this is ongoing, their system that they created for many years.
Well, it's so much evidence that shows the military operation, and I sympathize with people because it's like this. I mean, anybody knows it will. Data shows. Let's just go with data. But data shows if you do something for 3 weeks every single day, it becomes a habit. Just 3 weeks. So this is people. We're talking about. I'm 40 years old. I'm 40, right? So we're talking about people. Generally, the people who follow me are right around 45 at the lowest average, and at the highest and the most peak and the most saturated that follow me are right around 55 to 65. All right. So think about how long these people all over the world have been living under, especially, well, I always use America because it's so much easier for me to relate to Americans. They've been used to every 4 years a Republican candidate, whatever your views are, right? They're used to a Republican getting up and saying, I'm going to do this, and that. In the first 2 years, well, and a Democrat, if you're a Democrat, then you're used to a Democratic president getting up, I'm going to do this. The first 2 years of that 4 years, they spend that 2 years trying to destroy what just happened the first 4 years, which shows you an agenda. It shows you a never-ending cycle of something that never gets fixed. They're not looking at humanity as a whole, and what can we do to forward this? What can we do to move forward? And progression's okay moving forward. There's no one says you can't progress and evolve and do this and do that, but they're spending their time doing backwards. That alone should show people an agenda. They spend the 2 years here tearing down the last 4, and then the last 2 they set up, right? And then the next 4 of, if it's the same person, then they just spend even more digging a deeper hole. But if it's another candidate from another party, then that person comes in and they spend that time period knock it out. And they all go behind the doors. If you watch Matlock and some of these old, if you watch these old shows with like Perry Mason and Matlock, you know, the law don't work like it used to do in the old days where people actually gave a dang about the person they were representing. The law in the last 20 and 30 years, especially heavily more involved, has gotten where it's like O.J. Simpson and other cases where who else in the hell would have wanted to kill that person? And then these lawyers go into bat with the judge and they make these plea deals and they make these deals. They're all making money. It's their system anyways. So if people could apply that, how the judicial system is also a part of all the corruption in the past, not what's taking place right now, ladies and gentlemen. That's being dissolved. It's been dissolved. There's laws and orders in place for that. Donald Trump put in laws, federal protection of judges and federal protection of law enforcement because there was going to be a lot of whistleblowers. He put in that. That's why the National Guard were activated. That's why the reserve components were federalized and activated. That's why he put in these clauses because there's going to be a lot of whistleblowers. There's going to be a lot of people that have spines that do stand up and say, yes, this has been taking place. Yes, this person did that. Yes, this group did that. Yes, there's going to be. So, you know, it's already outlined for that. And if people, especially Americans, but if people around the world could see that that's what we're just talking about, chaos plus division equals power acquisition, create a problem we already have a solution to. That's their system. Ladies and gentlemen, by American standards, that is not checks and balances of what progresses our nation, what forwards our nation, what forwards the world. That is showing how they look back and they are in a system that they're working on like that. And they're all making money. They're all getting rich. And we're not. We're all peasants to them.
Yeah, and
Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative. We're all peasants to them. If you're not in their system, we're peasants to them. It don't matter what you believe.
Exactly. Yeah, and also this corporate interest, they are planning like 100 years. So you have all these companies, these entities, you have all these bureaucrats that have been sitting there for 40 years. They are not chosen every 4 years, but the people, the politicians, career politicians, they want only to do what's benefit them in order to have, lenders, and they are lobbyists. So, I mean, how can we rule a society and that is sustainable for all of us in the best interest of us?
Here's another
when they have like a 4-year plan instead of 100.
And here's another thing. In America, one person, man or woman, you can become a congressman for one term now, and you get retirement for life, $175,000. One term, $175,000 for life.
Yeah.
Apply that, Americans. Apply that. That's your tax money. One term. You can go in for one term, serve one term, and you get $175,000 for life retirement. Explain that one to me. Payoff.
No,
There's a payoff system. They know. They've been knowing. But see, here's the cool thing is, let me add this too, because I don't want to confuse people. Continuity of government does mean that it's bipartisan and Congress knows about it. But here's the thing. There's these congressmen and women that didn't have the backbone before because they didn't realize that they had a military that was going to work for them, that was going to protect them back here. So now that's what's taking place. These bipartisan people, yes, Congress knows what's going on. Congressmen and women, especially in America, but everybody in the world knows on the congressional levels, but they know what's going on. All right, so they were given a choice. Here's a line in the sand. You can stand on this side and you can fight for humanity, or we'll expose you to the world. You can be part of the exposure. So we had enough men and women on the congressional side that were like, you know what, I'm going to be a part of humanity. They knew they had backing. So yes, Congress, I get questions all the time. Does Congress know what's going on? I said, yes, they're playing a part. All this stuff on TV, once again, mainstream media is under NDAs and a wartime code. When Donald Trump became a wartime president, he gained powers that presidents don't normally have unless it's prescribed by law. The mainstream media are under 47 United States Code 606, which he can control TV, internet, radio broadcast, and also closing of government facilities. We've seen all those happen. We've seen the Federal Reserve Building have a big old giant wall put around it and a gate around it. The FDIC moved from DC to Texas. There's so much stuff that DC looks like a ghost town. The media told everybody that they built a separate press room. They're not on DC. They're not operating. As a matter of fact, the aircraft the other day, speaking of aircraft, speaking of military, so Joe Biden was supposed to go to Maine. Now, I'm not talking about if there was an actual atrocity that happened with shootings. This is where people want to focus on drama and they want to focus on heartstrings. Here's the deal. That aircraft, the mainstream media showed Biden's schedule to be speaking at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is all along the Atlantic coast, Eastern Standard Time. All right. I'm in Central Standard Time, but on my calculations, when the aircraft took off, I've got it screenshot proof. When Air Force One took off from Joint Base Andrews, it flew to Maine and it dropped down on Maine. It stayed there for 5 or so minutes and then it flew right back. Joe Biden had no time to speak. It flew after 5 p.m. from Joint Base Andrews. How in the heck is he in Maine speaking if Air Force One is back here? They show people more and more daily. Even though I've been knowing that, Air Force One didn't even take him to the quote-unquote inauguration because it wasn't an inauguration. It was a funeral service. All that was a movie. All that's been pre-recorded for everybody. Yeah. They did have something that day. They did have something that day in D.C. because they knew some people, they put the National Guard as far as back as they could and blockaded off where no one could see anything. But they knew someone was going to be in a building somewhere with their binoculars going, well, I don't see anything over there. So they put a few actors over there that day of it, but they blamed it on COVID. That's why people could not go and attend the inauguration. So you got to do all these common sense and go, well, now, why in the heck would they do that? Well, they had to, because if you didn't have something visual that day, then people would go, what the heck happened there? Why couldn't they do that? Why couldn't they wear masks around each other? Why couldn't? So all these things and those entities show that he's not. In the wartime code of the mainstream media are doing exactly what they want them to do. They're distracting most of the people. So that's what I tell people. If you want to follow that, then go for it, buddy. Go for it, boo-boo. I call them boo-boos. Go for it, boo-boo. But here's the deal. Here's what's actually taking place. This is what law looks like. This is what orders look like. If you want to know what's really going on, you want to educate yourself and empower yourself, then here's what's really going on. And that's all the distraction. And there's codes. You know what the 47 U.S. Code 606 is actually titled, ladies and gentlemen? It's actually titled War Powers of the President. So imagine that. Donald Trump became a wartime president by a thing called War Powers Act. And then he can control TV, radio, internet, and government facilities by a thing called the War Powers of the President. See, it all stacks up. It all adds up. It's just part of laws, part of orders, and how it all flows together. And so, it's little things like that you'll say something and it triggers me. Oh, I got to put that in there, because it all adds up for people once they see that. But, it's a difference in looking and seeing. There's a difference in hearing and listening. And I tell people, quit hearing to react and listen to respond. There's no dumb question. It just depends on how you're projecting it. And if you can't comprehend this, and then you turn around and say, well, I don't believe that's happening because you can't comprehend it. Well, that's not my problem that you can't comprehend it. I'm trying to help you comprehend it. So don't say it's not happening. I tell veterans that. There's a lot of veterans in the U.S. This ain't happening. They're just training. They're not just training. They're under an order, the same orders you served under. How did you serve in the military and take pride in serving in the military if you don't know the very laws and orders that you served under are different than civil laws and orders? So the military holds us to a higher precedent. And a matter of fact, I'm a retired veteran. Guess what I still fall under? Because I'm a retired veteran and I receive pay from the military. If I do something stupid or dumb or whatever it is, I can be court-martialed by the Uniform Code of Military Justice, military law. I could face military punishment and federal or civil punishment. So that's why I tell people, that's why you can believe me, is because I still fall under that clause, and I don't want to be punished by the military. I can assure you of that. Military ain't nowhere near like federal or civil punishment. You don't want to be punished by them.
No. No. So Derek, next time I want to talk more about this entity that is, on top of this network, this swamp, global swamp that is that has been ruling through, through communication, through everything essential actually that we need: power, communications, internet, stock market, and so on and so on, and also of course Bank of International Settlements, which is kind of the central bank of the central banks. So it's on top of all the central banks. But I send you a link now to the SpaceX after party, and it would be so nice if you have some time to just take some questions. And I mean, this is so important also for the Swedish audience to get to know you and to actually do the work, to read your documents, to see this documentary, and to digest it, because this is relevant also to Sweden. We are also under this. This is a global power grab, so to say, by the good people, because this was a global system. And do you have some time, Derek?
Yeah, I'll hop over there really quick. I'll hop on. I have to exit this one.
I sent you the link.
Get the link.
Did you find it?
Well, I'll have to exit the screen and I'll get it, but I'll just. Actually, I don't.
I just want to say that this is our second interview, and I hope for another one. This is so exciting. I'm so honored and pleased that you have joined us today, Derek. I know you are really busy. I've been waiting a long time for this interview, but I know that Kathy is doing her best to squeeze me in. So we hope for a third interview when you have time. And next week, I will also interview Dr. Jan Holper Hayes.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I'm looking forward to it. I'll come on anytime for sure. So
great. Thank you so much. And you will be able to listen to the space through YouTube. If you prefer to stay here, you can listen to the space as always. I will also jump over to the space and we can start discussing over there. Thank you so much for joining me, Derek. Thank you for your service for the world, and thank you for keeping up with all the trolls and haters. I see what you're going through, and we really, really appreciate you. Thank you so much.
no problem. Thank you.